What's good, artists? It's Curtis King of CurtisKingBeats.com here with another Artist Marketing 911. Artists, today we're going to talk about album covers. We're going to talk about the importance of your album cover and why that's not a step that you should overlook. Now, I know many of you already probably looking at me like, I know this is important, Curtis, but there's some things that I look at as strategy for myself that have helped me have some very successful album covers that have been received very well. I think an album cover is really a snapshot of a point in time in your life as an artist. Now, you know, like I know, there's some great album covers and there's some terrible album covers. I myself have been a victim and a successor of both. Now, I used to make my album covers on this program called MS Paint on Windows because I didn't know Photoshop. I didn't have access to Photoshop. So I made my album covers using pretty much these little pixel tools to put together an album cover, and it was as bad as it sounds like in my description. But I had a certain mentality. I knew the vision that I wanted. I knew that great album covers have multi-layers of representation. Now, what do I mean when I say that? I think great album covers represents not just the artist, but it represents a group of people. It represents a time. It represents a tone of the time. It represents what was going on in that time. I think great album covers really stand the test of time. I think because of what they represented historically in that time period. That being said, I think every great album cover tells a story. It shares a philosophy. It tells a very definitive and a very clear viewpoint, or it gives you a viewpoint into the mind of the creative and just where their mindset was at when they were creating that art. You got to look at your album cover the same way that you would look at your photo album. Now, usually people in their photo albums who used to make photo albums physically, they usually put their best photos in the beginning of a particular time period. Maybe this is when you turn 2 years old and you got your 2-year-old birthday party and they're showing the highlights first. And then along the way, you have some other pictures that are just as engaging. You got to think of your album cover as that happy birthday picture. You got to think of what best represents that point in time in my life as an artist and creative. What best represents that time period? Is it a picture of me eating a bowl of cereal while daytime talk shows are behind me? If that represents what you're going through, that may be the best album cover for you. But whatever it is, make sure that it's a photo that best represents what you're going through. It doesn't always have to be a high definition photo. It's definitely suggested, but it needs to be a photo that best represents your particular music and your particular fan base. Maybe they don't care whether or not you have the most high definition. Maybe your music is a very vintage 8-bit type of sound. Maybe that cover would best represent that. I think the first thing and probably the most important thing that you got to keep in mind when creating your album cover, beyond just the photo and the centerpiece that you're using, is your fonts and your colors. You got to think about the season that you think your album's going to come out. Is it the summertime? Is it the fall? Well, along these seasons, you'll notice that the colors tend to change and people tend to wear different colors. You'll even notice that banner ads and advertisements around you will start changing because it's basically becoming appropriate to the season. Well, is your album cover appropriate for the season? Do you have a bunch of people in swimwear throwing around a volleyball while you're in the middle of fall and everybody's freezing and wearing jackets? Even with that example, the problem is that it feels outdated, doesn't feel that it's relevant to the time period that people are consuming that. Is that to say that under no circumstances can you make that work? No. If you have a sense of irony in your picture, maybe it's somebody who has shorts on and a jacket and your name of your album is Icy Hot. Who knows? No matter what it is, you want to make sure that it's appropriate for the time period that it's coming out, because it's going to be very important for people who are consuming it who've never met you. And keep in mind, these rules are really for people who haven't met you. Your audience is your audience. They're going to go to your music regardless. But this is for people that you want as new fans to receive you and understand clearly what it is that you're trying to get across to them in the message of your album cover. That being said, I would do some research on color psychology. You can Google that right now and find multiple charts that show you oranges are for fun colors and more summertime. Reds are more exciting, and those can even be associated with summertime. You want to see the psychological effect that those covers have on your audience, and then that will allow you to pick the correct colors. Now, we're talking about colors, we're talking about photos, let's talk about fonts. People don't understand their fonts expose them. Your fonts can literally damage a high definition photo that you're looking like, man, this dude must be really professional doing his thing. And then that font comes in and it can really tear down the momentum that you're building up with an album cover. A font says a lot about you. Now, if you're a serious artist, but you're using this goofy ass font, people are not going to take that serious. People are going to assume that it's going to be a goofy ass album. And that's just the way people perceive certain fonts. When you're choosing the appropriate font for your album cover, you have to be able to separate the things that you like and the things that are most appropriate. You can like 1,000,001 fonts. They could be the dopest fonts you've ever seen. But if they're not appropriate to your album cover, icy hot, or whatever you call it, the album is not going to be received in the way that you want it to be received. Same thing of having a text that's too corporate or even too boring and you have nothing but party songs. It may not be indicative of what your brand stands for. It may not be what your actual attitude is in your music. It may not even be the tone of your music. The way I look at album covers is the same way I look at going to an amusement park. When you go to an amusement park and you're walking around, even if you haven't been in years, you're walking around and you look at a ride, you're sizing the ride up. You're looking at the colors. You're looking at the line. You're looking at what it's actually called. And you're thinking about, is this a ride that you want to go on? Well, your album cover is no different. Your music is a ride that people go on, and you want to make sure that the cover best represents what your ride is all about. Now, if you got people thinking that your ride is a lot more dangerous than what it is, well, they're going to be disappointed by the time they get to the third or fourth or fifth song, and they figure out, oh, this album is definitely not what this album cover represents. Don't overlook it. Also, something very important that I do, so important, probably the most important thing that I do when it comes to album covers. You gotta go through the thumbnail test. What is a thumbnail test? Basically, a thumbnail is a smaller version of a photo. It's about that big. Most of the time you'll find it on Twitter or Facebook in the smaller versions of your actual picture. Now here's the purpose of giving your album cover the thumbnail test. You got to think of where your album's going to actually appear. Is it SoundCloud? Well, guess what? The SoundCloud feed is actually a thumbnail picture of your album cover. They don't get the full resolution until they go to your page. The Apple iTunes store, most of those album covers are in thumbnails. When people are looking down at charts, those are mostly thumbnails. So you want to make sure you go through the thumbnail test. That's the purpose of it. But let me tell you what the thumbnail test is. Minimize the size of your album cover on your laptop and walk away about 3 or 4 steps away. From a distance, are you able to make out all the figures and all the things that are in that album cover? If you can be honest with yourself and say that, here's another test you should take it to. Find pictures that are similar colors to your album cover and make a grid. Minimize the grid. Then back away. Bring a friend in. Have them look from that same distance that you walked away and see if they can tell which album cover is yours. You want to make sure that you have an album cover that's going to stand the test of time. Well, the only way it's going to stand the test of time is if they can see it from a distance and you know exactly what album cover that is. Like Get Rich or Die Trying 50 Cent. I know what that album cover is from a distance. Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick. You know what album cover that is when you see it from a distance. It doesn't matter how small it becomes. You know exactly what that album is. So the thumbnail test is something you do not want to overlook. A lot of people do, and they wonder why when their album goes up for sale, why people are not gravitating towards it or not having an immediate reaction, or why only their own fan base is consuming it. Well, you have to go through the thumbnail test. You basically have to consume your cover in the same way that a new audience or a new potential fan is going to consume it. You got to see if it's appropriate for that. If you are an artist and you are unknown and you have it in your mind to be known, use a picture of your face. Somehow, some way, use a picture of your face. There have been many studies that suggest using your face actually gets a better reaction. I actually read an article on CD Baby that actually backed that up too, that said using a human face increases your chances of having engagement with people who don't know who you are, as opposed to just using this abstract image or abstract photo. Now, maybe your goal is to be mysterious, and maybe that's what you need for an album cover. By all means, this is your art. I can't tell you how to do your art. But for the sake of Artist Marketing 911, if you do want to get your name out there and you do want to be noticed, it's imperative to you that you have an album cover that somehow, some way has your face. Now, you don't have to do the rapper poses. You don't have to do the prayer hands. You ain't got to do this. You ain't got to do this, the confused head face. You don't have to do that. But you got to find some way to incorporate your face. So in conclusion, take time with your album cover. It's probably the most important step along your album promotion process. Your album cover is going to be with you forever. Your album cover is going to be cemented with you in history. And it can either be something that you're forever embarrassed about, or it could be something that you say, you know what, maybe I didn't have all the resources that I have now, but I gave that a really good shot. And for the most part, album covers don't always have to be complex. In that same article on CD Baby, they say that minimalism is in. And I actually believe that. There are a lot of album covers that are just text that properly represent what that album is all about. You just got to make sure you find the right font, the right colors, just the right representation of your art. The appropriate, now I shouldn't say the right. You want to find the appropriate representation of your art, which is your music, and the extension of your music is your cover art. This has been another Artist Marketing 911, Curtis King of CurtisKingBeats.com.
Play this every morning when you wake up. Oh, God told me not to sing on this, but I promise you, I feel like mystical. Hey, come on, let me get this.
Curtis King with 2 S's, Beats.com. Curtis King with 2 S's, Beats.com.